Time for another board game review, and this time we have the game Escape the Dark Castle, the game of atmospheric adventure. This was sent to me by Themeborne and is designed by Thomas Pike, Alex Crispin, and James Shelton. Wrongfully incarcerated in the depths of the Dark Castle, you and your fellow prisoners now embark on a desperate quest to escape. However, the castle is a treacherous place, filled with horrors, traps, and challenges, each of which is represented in the game by a large, beautifully illustrated chapter card. The object of the game is to overcome every card in the castle deck, while keeping everyone in your group alive. If you do this, you all escape the Dark Castle, and win the game together. However, if anyone dies along the way, the game ends immediately, and you must try again. Let me show you how to play. Alright, setup is very simple. You have these chapter cards, and you shuffle 15 of them into a pile and put the start card on top, and then you put a random boss card on the bottom, and this is your Dark Castle that you're trying to get through. This is an item deck, and these are chapter dice. There are 6 different character cards in the game. They each have different stats. The fist is might, the eyeball is cunning, and the little asterisk is wisdom, and they all have different specialties and strengths. Generally, you want to pick a balanced team. So if we do like a 2-player game, this plays 1 to 4. You could do maybe like this guy, the cook, is very, very strong with 4, but their wisdom's not too great. And then the tanner, she has high wisdom and low fighting, so you might want to do something like this, but it's really up to you. You can pick any characters you like, but they advise you to pick a balanced team. Each character has their own special character dice, and so the marks on here tell you how many times these symbols are on the dice. So the tanner has 1, 2, 3, 4 asterisks for wisdom, but only 1 fist for might. So that's how you can kind of determine which characters you want to use. You keep track of HP with pencil and paper. So for 2 players, you would have 18 HP each. But otherwise, you would have less with more players It's 14 HP for 3 players each, and 12 HP each for 4 players. During the game, you can gain and lose HP, but you can never exceed your starting HP. So how gameplay works is you turn over the chapter cards one by one and complete the challenges revealed. So let's look at this. They have narration. After years of incarceration in the depths of the Dark Castle, you finally break free of your cell. In a small stone room adjoining the cell block stands an old wooden chest. The lock is open. Draw an item card per player now. So the cook could get the Elixir of Insight. You can discard this over any round of combat to change any 1 chapter dice to show a trait of your choice. And then the tanner could draw an item card, and this is the Effervescent Evasion Potion. When you would take damage, discard to avoid that damage. So you each start with 1 randomly drawn item, and then we continue reading. You hear footsteps approaching. You must not linger here. You make for the exit, slipping away and disappearing into the darkness. Turn the first chapter card now. So there's no turn order. You must decide as a group which player will turn each chapter card, but be warned, chapters sometimes contain grisly consequences, which only apply to the player that turned the card. Anything that has a bold U indicates the person who turned the card. The instructions on each chapter card will explain what must be done to complete the chapter. You may be asked to make a choice, roll dice, use items, fight an enemy, etc. When you've completed a chapter, continue turning the page until you escape the Dark Castle by defeating the boss at the end, or until the character is killed and you lose the game. Item cards are drawn when the text of a chapter card says so, just like this beginning chapter here, and also after combat. When instructed to draw a number of item cards, draw and place them face up where all players can see, then decide as a group how the items will be distributed. So you could actually be like, you can take this potion, I'll take this potion. Each character can carry a maximum of 2 items. Think of it as 1 item in each hand. The items a character is carrying should be placed beside their character card. Some items are described as 2-handed, which means a character cannot carry any other items at the same time. Items can be traded between characters, but only after a chapter has been completed or when new item cards are being drawn. They cannot be traded during the events of a chapter or during combat. When you're trading item cards or choosing which item cards to take from those just drawn, characters can temporarily put down items already in their possession, use items, pass items between each other, or any combination of those actions, but unwanted items are left behind and should be discarded in a face-up discard pile. Items can be used at any time unless the item card indicates otherwise. The text on each item card describes what it does. Some items must be discarded, but unless instructed to do so, you can keep an item for as long as you like. So let's turn a page and see what happens. At the end of this passage, passage is an old stone well. As you reach in to test the waters, it thrashes into a violent torrent. You have disturbed a malevolent spirit. Begin combat. And this one is a combat special. You, whoever flicked this card, so let's say the cook flipped it. That player is incapacitated for the first round of combat, during which you do not fight and may not rest, but still take damage as normal. You recover at the beginning of the second round. Now what this means here is what you need to defeat the enemy. So take dice and match it with those symbols. So you need one of the cunning, one wisdom, and then this symbol here means you take a dice for each player in the game, in this case 2, and roll them. All right, so we also need might and another wisdom. Combat is fought in rounds, and each round has 2 simple steps: attack and defend. Before beginning each round, first decide if any player is going to rest, which I'll explain later. But let's say you're going to attack. To begin a round of combat, each participating player simultaneously rolls their dice to make an attack. Then, in any order the players choose, resolve these attacks one at a time as follows. Now, because of the combat special, whoever pulled the card, in this case the cook, is incapacitated for the first round. So they can't fight, they can't rest. So only the tanner can roll the dice for this. So they take their dice, they roll it, it's a fist. So they get to knock out one of these dice from the monster. If both characters had rolled, which I'll show you in a second, you can resolve the attacks one at a time. But for now, since only one character can fight, he rolled and knocked out one of the might requirements. If you roll a double like this, you can actually knock out 2 fist dice or might dice if you have this. So 2 dice could have been removed if you had had 2 fists. They're also surrounded by a shield symbol, meaning that if you, not only do you hit, but you can block, which I'll explain in a second. So we had our attack round, but now they have to defend. There are still chapter dice remaining, which means the enemy is still alive and is going to fight back. Any character who did not block takes damage equal to the attack value. Right here it's 2, so they will both go down from 18 to 16. Boom, 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 boom. If either character had rolled a block, they would take no damage that round. This ends one round of combat and begin the next round by simultaneously rolling. So now the cook is recovered, so they can roll their dice. So let's have them both roll again. But let's say before we do any of that, let's say the cook decides to use their elixir of insight, and they're going to change their this symbol to a fist, because that's their strength. So you could choose to discard this to change that chapter dice to show a trait of your choice. All right, let's see if this works for them. Let's roll them together. Oof, bad roll. Since they both rolled cunning and that doesn't match any of the traits, they don't do anything this round. It's all a miss. But so now the monster's going to attack back with 2. Let's say in this case the tanner decides to use their potion to avoid that damage. In this case, only the cook would take 2 damage. Come on, guys, you can do better than this. Let's roll an attack. We got him. No, not so much. The tanner rolled 2 cunning, but with a shield, and the cook rolled a wisdom. So we can knock out one of these dice. Still got 2 left. And then in this case, tanner is going to take no damage, but the cook will take 2 damage again. Cook is not doing so hot. So combat keeps going like that. Let's say in this round, finally, the cook rolls a fist and the tanner rolls a wisdom. Now they have defeated the monster, and the monster is instantly destroyed. As soon as you survive a combat, you get to draw an item card. Liquid Luck. Discard or reroll your character dice, applying only the second result. This would have been pretty useful for them. So let's say the cook will take that card. Then choose which player will turn the next chapter card and continue the game. Some enemies, like this one, have a special combat ability. Like this one incapacitated the cook. They usually break the standard rules of combat in a devious ways, making for fearsome opponents. Just make sure you remember those combat specials before you start fighting. And then the rest option, which I mentioned earlier. At the beginning of each combat round, before the players attack, one player can choose to rest. So let's say in one combat round, the cook was like, oof, I need to heal. I'm getting my shit wrecked. They can hang back from the fight to momentarily recuperate. A resting player does not roll, doesn't take damage, and cannot use items. they gain 1 HP for each round they rest. So if the cook had done that, they could have gotten 1 HP back. The resting player can rejoin combat at the beginning of any round they choose, or can rest for the entire combat if they wish. So if the cook was like, Tanner, you got this one, they could just rest the whole time, but then the Tanner, it's going to take a long time for the Tanner to fight, and they're going to take damage if they are unlucky. While only one player can rest each round, it is possible for multiple players to rest on different rounds of the same combat by taking it in turns. Now, I don't want to reveal too many of these cards because that's kind of the fun of the game is discovering it, but I'll show you just 1 or 2 more. So the smell of manure is thick as you enter this. I'm not going to read the whole thing. It's an agitated beast of burden. I do encourage you when you're actually playing the game to read it because it's great writing. But just for the sake of, I don't want to, spoil too much. Anyway, this is an agitated beast of burden. So in this guy, he only has 2 chapter dice, but for his combat special, each round when it attacks, it does an additional 1 HP of damage to any players who hit it during that turn. So he does kind of like a counter attack. That's a little rough. Here's an example of a non-combat card. In this one, you have a flooded cave, and you can try to roll a double in 1 attempt. For each player, if you succeed, you make it through. But if you fail, you flounder and lose 1 HP and try again. And if you have not succeeded after 3 attempts, you make it through. So there's not always combat. Sometimes there's just dangerous scenarios. I'm not going to go through, I just want to, there's a lot of different chapter cards, so each game is going to be completely different. I don't want to go through too many because I don't want to spoil this for people who are interested in the game. But just, that gives you a kind of sense of like the type of combat or scenarios you can find. And we can take a look at some of the items here. We already know that one. Stale loaf of bread. Discard this to restore 2 HP to your character. The distilled wisdom. You can apply a single wisdom at any time. That's pretty useful if you're running low on wisdom rolls. Here's an example of a one-handed weapon, a decayed blade. Once per round of combat, when you roll wisdom, you may roll again and choose which of the 2 results to apply. It gives you a little more choices during battle. So a lot of different items, potions, weapons, and stuff. I don't want to go through too many of them because, again, it's kind of the fun of the game is discovering these for yourselves. But that's pretty much the game. You just reveal chapter cards, and if there's a monster, you got to beat it. Otherwise, if there's a difficult decision, sometimes it's like a choice, sometimes it's like a roll to see if you succeed situation. You're basically just rolling your dice and trying to get through all the way to the end. And if you manage to get to the end with no one dying, you win. And that's the game. So for me, this game captures the feeling of playing a really well-crafted but simple roguelike. It's super light. Essentially, all you're doing is rolling a dice over and over again and making choose-your-own-adventure decisions, but it is dripping with creepy atmosphere and full of tense moments of, will we survive this? Like, I didn't want to spoil too much of the game, but the writing is great. It's really, really, like, just creepy and gross, and it's fantastic. Finding good items in the game gives you that same rush when you have a really good roguelike run. They do clever things with the encounters to make them feel unique, and I like that the castle is randomly generated every time. Because the game is so short and very easy to set up, like literally all you do is put down 15 cards, boss, item deck, pick characters, just jump in. When you die, you can immediately just go, let's just do it again, give it another run. Maybe we'll see what happens this time. The art is fantastic and creepy. I love the black and white aesthetic. Even though the main mechanic is just dice rolling, the decisions you make offer interesting strategy. Like, for example, is it worth it to take 2 damage so we can avoid a fight that could potentially be even worse than that? Or should we just go for it and see what happens? In super tense scenarios, we found ourselves just like cheering when the right roll came up. So if this kind of thing appeals to you, like a short, compact, but really atmospheric experience where you can just jump right in and see what happens, appeals to you, I highly recommend the game. It works for me because it is extremely simple and yet wrapped in that cool horror package. Again, like I said before, it just feels like a really fun roguelike. And I think the overall design and writing and decision you have to make is great for what it is. So I highly recommend it. It's good shit.